but some of the most important things is like you are building that strong culture so you can generate strong business results.
And welcome back to Avidly Talks. I'm joined by Rachel Leist, our VP of Marketing, VP of Product Marketing at HubSpot. How's it going?
Good. It's good to see you again.
You too? Where are you based?
I am based in Massachusetts in the US, so right outside of Boston.
So when we met in Boston, we realised, yes, we need a conversation. Now, we were talking about product marketing and the future of HubSpot's product.
Yeah.
So when you said, let's talk about building a team.
I know. I threw you a curveball there. We had such an amazing talk at Inbound about product marketing and, how HubSpot is easy, fast, and unified and how we came up with that and the value of HubSpot's customer platform. I love talking about all those.
You still got easy, fast, and unified in though.
I know I did. See, so
Well done.
I had to make sure we got that in, even if we were talking about a different topic. But, I think a lot on people's minds right now is, we're past COVID. A lot of us are still remote. Some people are trying to, be pulled back into the office. But it's one of the most essential parts, even for product marketing too, to be able to execute successfully. And so I was like, let's change it up. Let's talk about building teams.
No product marketing.
Yeah.
We're building teams. I was like, okay, so why?
Well, this will give you a chance to invite me on a future podcast to talk about product marketing. So, I was just like, I was playing it cool. But I also think it is such an important part to make sure you're working with the best possible people, that you're making them feel like they can bring their best ideas to the table, that they can essentially do their best work. And building a team, no matter what role, function, or department you're in, is going to be important.
What's your team structure that you're in?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I oversee our product marketing team. We have a couple of different parts of the team. Some are focused on what we call like core product marketing, which is supporting our different hubs. And then we have other folks on the team who work on market research or a customer proof, so making sure we highlight all of our customers and our content and through case studies. And then I have another part of my team who is focused on programs and operations and making sure that things like Inbound and our spotlights have a strong product presence and that we're working successfully. A lot of product marketing is actually cross-functional collaboration and making sure that your messaging and positioning is built into materials that are used across all of our other channels. And so, that's how my team is structured. We have a couple of directors, a couple of managers, and it's a lot to make sure that no matter how many layers you have on the team, that everyone understands your vision, understands what you're working towards, and even in this remote world, that they still feel like connected to you as a leader, but also your mission and your strategy.
Is all your team US based?
They are not. So my current team is a mix of EMEA and US based. My previous teams were even more spread out than that.
Oh, okay. And is your sort of remit global, or is it just EMEA, Americas?
No, it's global. And so that's another thing. Like, we have to make sure that we're taking into account just regional nuances. We do have someone who is not technically on my team, but she supports me. She's called our international champion. And she makes sure that when we are rolling out new positioning and messaging, we are using a global lens. So that could mean a certain feature might not matter as much in some regions as others. And how do we make sure we have the right go-to-market strategy in those regions? See, we're talking about product marketing too. We're talking about it all.
You've had a few different teams. You've talked about post-COVID. Were you in any remote teams pre-COVID?
I was. So my team pre-COVID, so I was overseeing what we called our new business and solutions marketing team. And so it was essentially, we would generate qualified demand for the sales team, and we did that in 5 languages globally. So even though all of us in the US were in the same office at the time, we did have people who were in 5 other countries on the team. And so it actually, while there was of course a lot of adjusting for everyone post COVID, we already had some of that already set up because we were in so many different locations to begin with.
With our probably lots of our listeners, because it's lots of our customers, that sort of certain roles will be in office, but sales and marketing tend to be remote.
Yeah.
Have you've come in as a manager to an existing remote team?
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen different to doing that than building your own team? How is that different to, like, okay, I'm coming into a new company and I'm building my own team remotely.
Yeah.
How have you navigated those two different routes to managing a team?
Yeah, it's definitely it's very different in terms of what you have to start with. Like when you come into an existing team, you already have there's existing goals that you have to hit that your team is focused on. And so I found that you have to spend a lot of time listening up front. You want to make sure the people on the team.
How do you do that remotely, though?
Yeah. So when I took over product marketing, I think there was about 45 people on the team, somewhere in that range. I set up one-on-ones with everyone individually. And some of that was to hear their feedback on the team, and others was just to hear like about them as a person and understanding what motivates them, like even outside of work. Like I think it's very important to be able to connect to people on that personal level, to be able to really get to know them.
Being the team member on the other end of that, they want to do exactly that with you. Was that not exhausting? Be honest.
To be honest, like, yeah, it was exhausting. So, like, cause I wanted to meet everyone as soon as possible. And so you would have had like maybe 10, at least 10 meetings, 10 one-on-one meetings a day. And it's definitely tiring. But I took away so much from it. And I also wanted to make sure, I wanted to make sure too that I showed up for that person, because on their end, it's one meeting. It's not 10 meetings back to back. And so I can't come off as like, oh, I'm tired. This is like my 5th meeting or a 10th meeting of the day. But it was hugely helpful, because I think what it also did is, I don't want anyone on the team feeling like they can't approach me and give me feedback and share something that they think is working well or not working well. And that opened up the door so that they would also get to know me as a person as well.
It's got to be done, and you're
Yes.
100% right. I just mean that it can be. We often, new starters will go around and meet different teams.
Yeah.
Feedback they always share is, yeah, it's good. It's great to meet everyone, but I can only tell so many people that my dog's named Reggie that I've got to.
My dog's name is Milo. You can follow him at Everybody Loves Milo on Instagram. I don't get tired telling people about my dog. No, but in all seriousness, yeah, it's like it is tiring. I'm an extrovert, but it's still tiring.
If you can sort of treat it as what it is they're getting to know you, you're getting to know them. But I guess the questions they ask can be quite illuminating about character. If if someone asks you run-of-the-mill questions, perhaps they've not let the guard down yet. If someone asks something really outside the box, you could be like, that's how their mind works.
That's exactly it. And I think the interesting thing too is who, by the end of the conversation, feels comfortable like telling me something that is on their mind, bothering them, or something they really feel strongly about. Like I think I always felt good when someone felt like they could give me constructive feedback, or or really tell me a problem they were struggling with. I think for them, for the individual, they don't always want to say that to their new leader. But for me, I'm like, oh, you feel comfortable sharing that with me, and this is actually really valuable information, because I'm doing the listening tour to get to know the people, but I'm also doing it so I can develop the strategy for the team.
Yeah, exactly. Did you how did you sort of maintain things then after that initial meet?
Yeah.
Because everybody's keen to meet you, but you can't
Yeah.
spend one-on-one calls with everybody in a team that large, can you?
Totally. Yeah. So there's a couple things I do. I think there's three things that come to mind. So first, usually that like first month and a half, like a 4 to 6 week period, it's meeting a lot of people and then putting my thoughts on paper. I do like to have I end up doing this whenever there's a team reorg or like once a year. So I'm actually working on my planning presentation now to talk through here's a team vision and strategy. But also like every presentation it starts off with here's what I heard from you throughout the year or now that I've been on the team for a while, like here's what I think went like really well this year. And then it goes into because of what I heard from you and because of what I know is going on with the business right now, here's the strategy, here's where we will have the most impact. And then here's my expectations for everyone on the team. And then after that, I go into here's some things about how the team needs to operate. We call them like them team norms. So this essentially like even there's things in there like if you're booking time with someone in Europe, don't book time when it's like 7 or 8 p.m. for them. Like there's things like that. And then there's also things like as you're working with different folks, make sure that you're giving them lead time. You're like asking questions, you're coming from curiosity. Like there's different things like that in terms of how we need to operate and the team culture we want to build. And then there's things like here's how often we'll meet. Here's my operating model with other leaders. Here's how I'll give you updates or things like that. So I always like to have that like vision and strategy kickoff for the year.
Do you do that every year?
Every year, yes. And then sometimes more than once a year if there's a like bigger reorg. Like we've had leaders I had a leader leave and we had to do some like restructuring because she left, and so I had to do another like it was basically like a mini kickoff because it happened again. So like some of that you can't control, but always once a year to kick off the year strong. I try to do that end in November, beginning December, so we can spend time the rest of the time planning and you can kick off January strong.
Makes sense.
Yeah. The other thing that I do to keep in touch with everyone is I send out biweekly looms. So every other week I will send things that include like personal update from me, just some things about my life, updates from leadership, key projects I'm working on, and then also key projects that some people on the team are working on that I think will be valuable for others to hear about. So it's funny. When I first started doing them, it's like, oh my gosh, this must be a pain for people to listen to. No one wants to hear me talking for 10, 15 minutes. And I've gotten such positive feedback from them because it just gives them insight into what I'm working on, what the business cares about, how I'm interacting with other stakeholders, and it's a great way for me to communicate at scale as well.
Do they share them back?
Um,
Everybody in your team do that?
No, so that's a great question. So that goes to my entire team. So whether or not they report to me or not, and they don't share them back, but they'll comment and sometimes ask questions on it. It'll open up conversations for other things. So it's been a really helpful way to communicate.
Have you ever sort of built this kind of team up from scratch?
Yes. So one of my first manager roles was when we were actually trying to build a motion to generate demand for our install base of customers, not just net new demand. And that was a team that I built from the ground up. So that was a lot of, it was more talking to stakeholders. It wasn't talking to my existing team because I didn't have one at the time. And then really figuring out how to hire. And I think one of the most important things was my first gut instinct was I have all these problems right now. I need to hire against them. I need to have plans against them. And then I took a step back and said, I won't have these problems in 6 months. I need to hire for the problems we need to solve in the next 2 years. And so I ended up making a very different hire than I was originally planning for someone who I thought would help me solve problems in the long term. So I could deal with some of the short-term pain, but we would still build for the long term.
That's very smart. Eye on the future like that. You mentioned, just circling back to having a team over in Europe as well.
Yes.
I know there's differences sort of in a country.
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm from northwest England. We're very different from, in lots of ways, we're similar, but very different from, say, someone from Scotland or
Yeah.
London. How do you sort of get your team all on board with, I don't know, communication styles are different in
Yeah.
Germany compared to France, compared
Yes.
to America.
Yeah, definitely. So, I feel like when we first started hiring global folks, it was a lot of an educational tour around the manager of that team, or even some of the individuals in countries like Germany, France, saying like, "Hey, here's the differences that you might not know about, and here's some like language differences, here's some like behavior differences," and they were doing a lot of education for us. I think part of that is making an environment where you have to ask those questions. So there's little things like whenever everyone starts every call talking about the weather. It's just like, it's
Mm.
such a stereotype thing, but everyone does it. You need to make sure you know Fahrenheit versus Celsius, like as you're talking. There's like little things like that just to make people feel included and make them know, like, hey, I am thinking about things globally. I also the other thing that is one of the team norms on my team is that when we are doing a product training, it is a requirement on my team that you have to do it in two time zones. Like we do one for the JPAC time zone, we do one for like America and EMEA, and like I don't care if there's 10 people on the JPAC one versus like hundreds of people on the earlier one. It's a requirement. And so once
Mm.
you start making things like that, it becomes more embedded. And then I find that people who are in different parts of EMEA start sharing more of like, hey, here's like some differences you might not know about.
They don't come out though, do they? Until they're hard to think of. You think of the obvious ones,
Yeah.
Celsius and Fahrenheit, or time zones, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of the subtle things for sales and marketing purposes. I
Yeah.
don't know how forthright you can be in your messaging,
Yeah.
or
I think the obvious ones open the door to that conversation, and then I can say to someone on my team who is in that region, like, hey, I need help understanding this. Like, are you open to spending some time educating the team on it, because like this is important, and you need them to see like why it's important. Um,
Mhm.
I find even though the time zone one is so obvious, there's still so many people like booking meetings with people in Europe at like 6 7 p.m. their time.
Yeah.
So yeah, but so I think it's about like opening that door, opening the conversation, showing it's a priority, and then asking like, hey, I know like you're gonna have to take more time to do this, and I don't mean to put the burden on you, but I think there will be huge benefits if you can educate the team on this.
Do you have many people joining your team who need to get their sort of approach to remote team working adjusted from?
I Yeah, I think so. Because I think there's a lot of, we call it like working in public. And so, I think some of the most successful people are going to ask questions and show their curiosity and share some of the work they're looking on. But depending on that person, that might feel uncomfortable for them. That might make them feel like, oh, I don't want to brag about my work. And it's not, it's sharing learnings. And so there's definitely people on the team that have to be pushed. And I think depending on the cultural differences, that's very uncomfortable for certain people.
Do you have like instant messenger tools at HubSpot?
Yeah, so we use Slack.
And I remember when I last spoke to somebody about Slack, it was definitely pre-COVID, but it was like, I don't know, something ridiculous like 4 Slack channels for everybody, and it was not a place. We've got about 400.
Yeah, we have so
What?
many.
What? Yeah, times have changed then since I last saw it. Have you got sort of any etiquette or rules that people follow to be sharing what they're doing that day or something like that? I know you have a lot of it's based on trust, but
Yeah.
it's hard to be connected to each other without sharing what you're actually doing every day. So, what
Yeah.
ways have you got for helping people sort of stay connected? It's not like you sat next to each other, and I don't need to know what you're doing because I'm checking on you. I just
Yeah.
want to be connected with you and know what you're doing. But also,
Yeah.
as a manager, you sometimes do need to know what people are doing because
Definitely.
priorities might change, and you need to know who to move off that onto this. How do you
Definitely.
do that?
Yeah, so it's funny. I think, when you're at some when you ask someone for regular updates, their first impression is, "Oh my gosh, did I do something wrong?" And that's not the case at all. It's like, as a manager, you need to know that information, or sometimes it might be the case, but also as a manager, you need to know that information to give them visibility, get them more resources, make sure you're communicating about it. There's like a lot that goes into that, and so I find that sharing that extra why with people goes a long way. I know I
Yeah.
haven't answered your question fully yet, but I'm gonna get to it. But I think that is the most important thing. You need to tell people, hey, I'm asking you for this, not because I don't trust you, but because I want to make sure XYZ person knows that your work is amazing and how it fits into their work. And I'm trying to connect the dots across the org for you so you can stay focused on the work. And I think that goes a long way because it also makes them feel valued and like they're doing good work, which is usually the case. I think, to go back to your actual question in terms of what's the Slack etiquette, we don't have an exact operating model for, hey, here's exactly when to give updates and how. I tend to, when I am talking to people on the team or when I'm talking to even their managers, I'll say, hey, so and so is doing really great work here. I think they should share it. And even in this channel, in this context, and tag in these people because they'll find it very valuable. We also
Yeah.
have a couple of team channels that are like cross team, like my team and the brand team work really close together. So we have a channel with our two teams to share learnings like that. And kind of like get the juices going to figure out,
Yeah.
hey, this could make a good campaign or a good post. So there's not like an exact etiquette that we have because there's also your point. There's so many channels now. It can be very hard to keep up with, but every so often, like pointing people in the right direction, then we'll start creating habits.
I think you're sort of know what you're getting in for coming and joining a global company like at the scale of HubSpot.
Yeah.
Have you worked in any smaller teams that might be more relatable to like your medium-sized businesses? So they could be in perhaps a handful of countries rather than truly global.
Yeah. Well, I actually was at HubSpot. I've been at HubSpot for 13 and a half years. So when I started HubSpot, we were 200 people. There were 20 people in marketing sitting around a large table, and we had not actually opened our first Europe office yet. So, but back then it was you know, I remember HubSpot. I was told when I first started, like people work remote when when they're traveling, but like everyone usually comes in the office, so it wasn't as much of a remote world. So back then it was a easier to communicate with your stakeholders. You
Yeah.
could just walk over to folks. But I do think some of these lessons and ways of communicating that we've done so much remote can actually apply when you're in person too. You can still like send a loom to a smaller team when you want to reach them all at scale, because even back then, like I didn't talk to all 20 people on the team regularly, and then if you get busy, you like are heads down on your desk not thinking about what else is going on in the business. So I think some of these are actually pretty translatable, though. You might not have to, hopefully you don't have as many channels if you're at a smaller company, but I'm sure that ends up being the case.
If you're coming in as a new manager to an established team, I know you've kind of grown in a few teams and built your own, but when you've come in as a manager onto some teams,
Yeah.
have you any tips that people need to remember?
Yeah, so I think, inheriting a team can be amazing because you have a like functioning team already in place. It can also be challenging because there's a lot of knowledge you don't already have, and there's existing norms and there's existing processes. I think one of the things that is really important is to set guardrails with the people in the team, and also expectations. So saying, this is what I'm doing my first 30 days. I'm not going to have the answers to XYZ. Here's where I will provide value, and here's how I'll work with you while I'm getting up to speed. I also think I've been in the situation where I inherit a team and they had previously reported to the person who is now my boss, and that can be tricky too. And that I think happens to a lot of people. Even if you get a promotion and now you're managing people who were previously your peers, that's a case where it's very important to create that operating model so the people on your team learn they have to come to me as the new manager versus going to their previous manager who is now my boss, and like what is that cadence for skip levels, and what is that cadence to interact, because you don't want to make it so they feel like they can never go to your manager, but you also need to develop that relationship with them and show that like you're the one that's going to have like decision making power now.
How do you do that?
So I think that has been creating a clear operating model, aligning with, like, in my case, my manager on that, saying, here's what the skip levels will look like. Here's how we'll keep you updated on our progress, like whether it's, monthly for certain projects, weekly, outlining that as clear as possible, and then seeing how it goes in a month. You can't just say, okay, one and done, that's done. You have to constantly make sure you're iterating and checking on those things, while also hitting all your goals and doing all the other stuff.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. Like the sort of, I think we're assuming a lot here is in place in terms of project management and sort of existing working processes. So I think that's a whole other part to it that we've not mentioned. But as a leader, a remote leader of your remote team, how are you then strengthening and building deeper connections with people on your team who you're not sat next to, like at the water cooler or at lunchtime?
So I tend to make either mental notes or sometimes honestly written notes about like different things that I know are happening in people's lives, and making that connection with them and checking in and saying, oh, how so-and-so, like, what do you think of this? Or even posting in our team channel, like, hey, here's some pictures with like, here's some Halloween pictures. Would love to see everyone's, like, making time for things like that. It can be really hard to do that in the day-to-day when you're in back-to-back meetings, but like sometimes it takes like 5 minutes out of your day to do something like that. And it'll go a long way to honestly like make a great environment for the people who are working for you, but also it's a nice thing for you as a leader to be able to connect that way with the people on your team.
It's interesting that a natural, like you called yourself an extrovert, but natural people person, you seem still having to be purposeful to do that. I think that's a step that you do it naturally in person, but because you're not naturally physically sat next to someone, you've got to sort of force yourself to do it, I guess.
No, I think you're so right on that, and that was one of the biggest transitions for me with COVID was I had a moment where during COVID I was like, am I an introvert now? Like, am I like, I'm actually like kind of nice being in my bubble sometimes, like, but I'm still an extrovert, as you can see, but you do have to be purposeful, because one of the things that has happened during COVID is we are now so attached to our desks that you don't have to build in that time for commuting. And so you can work and work and work and work and not take a step back and remember some of the other things that everyone just did in person because it was natural. And listen, I do want to share some of the most, like, I'm talking about how to build a strong culture, but some of the most important things is like you are building that strong culture so you can generate strong business results. If you have people on your team who do not understand their vision, the purpose of the team, and can connect to that, then they're not going to be able to drive business results that you need for your company and for your team. And so I am definitely focused on building that environment, because it's the right thing to do for the individuals, but also for the business.
Yeah. And then if you can get it rolling, it's the same as having a good team in person, isn't it? I think there's one other aspect is welcoming people into the team, and people could be new to remote. How as a manager, how do you facilitate them being comfortable? So it's one thing getting the team all set up and knowing how everything's going, but what if somebody's new? How do you as a manager help them?
Yeah, so whenever there's someone new who starts my team, I book time with them. And so, it's not 10 one-on-ones in the same day, but it's, I welcome them to the team. We have what we call a 100-day doc. And what the 100-day doc does is it goes through what are their projects for the first 100 days, but also how is the team set up? Where are all the like operating models and documents for the team? we give them like a product marketing buddy, so someone who is not their boss and not on their team that they can ask questions to. And so these docs are usually like, could be up to like 10-15 pages. They're very, very long and detailed, but what I've heard from the new hires starting on the team is they are hugely helpful, and it helps them just like navigate the org. The org is obviously very big, it's very complicated, and it gives them that first step, and also invites them to ask questions and makes it acceptable for them to ask questions.
That's key. I'm finding as we've gone global, we went remote anyway, like everybody did, but
Yeah.
as we switched to a global team, asking questions is absolutely golden.
Yeah. And, I found that some of the most successful people on the team are the ones that ask the most questions, and want to normalize that as much as possible, because there can be that, like, that internal narrative, like, oh, if I ask questions, then that's not a good thing. No, it's the best possible thing.
I think if you're leading the team as well, I think it can be you know who to check in on, the people who aren't asking questions.
Yeah, no, it's
they might be fine. If they're
yeah,
fine, great. Get those learnings out of them and that experience shared, and then you might find out that they're not fine. So
definitely.
different habits. It's the things, isn't it, that you'd see around the office.
Yeah, right. Here, yeah, it's like
How do I
actually.
spot them remotely?
Right. Well, and on the question part two, I also find, like you were asking earlier, if as a new manager inheriting a team, I also think it's very so earlier on I used to be like, I have to know all the answers. I can't say I'm not sure. I can't ask questions. That is so wrong. My approach now has been, if I don't know something, let's be very clear. I'm going to be clear about it. I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to get the information, and then I'll be able to have an informed answer. And I think that is one of the most important things, and also mistakes that I think new leaders make sometimes, is feeling like they have to have all the answers, and it comes off as inauthentic too.
Yeah, that's true. I interrupted you. What were you going to say around spotting things around the office?
What was the question on finding things around?
So I was saying you spot trying to work out remotely how to identify. You walk to get a coffee and you see someone who's on your team just getting annoyed at their computer, and you go over and you say, "Are you okay?" And they go, "How do I do this thing?"
Yeah.
You need to eke those things out when you're remote, don't you?
It's such a good point. I think that's probably the stuff that I will miss the most being remote. Like, I won't always pick up on that, but sometimes you can get a sense of it. You can get anyone who listens to this on my team is going to be worried that I'm like staring at them during meetings. But during meetings, I am looking, like, as I'm listening to the presentation, I'm looking very closely at that Zoom window to see a couple things. One, who is trying to talk, who's doing the like fish face where they're like, and like can't get a word in. And then also who is like looking like stressed, upset, confused. And so, for better or for worse, I will say, "Hey, so-and-so, like, it looks like the wheels are spinning. Like, tell me what's on your mind." And so picking up on it in meetings. That being said, to your point, there's probably someone spinning that I am missing because I'm not in a meeting with them. I can't always pick up on that stuff over Slack. But I, as much as possible, ask the people who report directly to me to flag that stuff so I can help. We call it clearing the fog here.
That's what I was going to say. I think it's those, whether you've got a big team like you have, where you've got official, like, lieutenants.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. Or if you're a small team, it's the trusted people who are more sort of emotionally in tune with their peers.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at building that culture and looking out for each other as well, I think is
Yeah.
key. Tell you what, I'm robbing extra time, but what's something that people can do this week to help build a better remote team environment? Because I imagine it's turn of the year, it might be you've got new people joining, or we're getting ready for next year now, or the new year.
Yeah.
What can people start doing immediately from your experience to help foster a better team?
I think they can provide the why more, why they are asking for certain deliverables, why they are why they are asking for just making all the asks that we were talking about before. I think as you're going into next year, now is the time to make it really clear what do you want to accomplish in 2025? What are your expectations? Being so crystal clear. Also, how are you going to enable your team on that? And what, more importantly, are you not going to do to enable your team? What is the responsibility of the individuals on the team? And then I think it's what we were talking about around like giving people that voice and making sure you are picking up on confusion and looking for those cues and being really purposeful about your interactions. Those are a lot of things. Maybe you don't do all of them this week, but you can start doing those things this week.
And I think, well, you tell me actually. You've done this longer than I have. Explaining what you're doing with, I'm explaining why. Here's why.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Explain the why and, communicating that. Like it's we're moving so fast. It's hard to do that sometimes, but take the extra 30 seconds because it can prevent someone on your team from spinning their wheels around why you don't trust them, which ends up taking more than 30 seconds.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. One final question. What are you reading or listening to at the moment? I just keep seeing the books over your shoulder.
Oh my gosh. Well, I am reading Mindset by Carol Dweck. This was a book that Yamini had just recommended. So I'm about to start that. I did just finish reading the Sarah J. Maas books that are all the rage right now, but that was on the personal side, not the professional side. And also a huge fan of Pivot with Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. It's one of my favorites. So listening to a lot.
And you're doing audiobooks at the moment?
So it's funny. I do a mix of audio, ebook, and library book, depending on, so I can, no matter what I'm doing, I can either be, reading a hard copy, or if I'm in the car, I have the audio book going. I have quite the system down.
Brilliant. I'll get the workbooks onto my to read list. I'll take the tip.
I love it.
Thank you very much for coming on. And if you're listening and you've enjoyed the episode, check out other episodes. You mentioned Yamini. She was on recently. I guess your big boss, CEO of HubSpot, and we've got over 130 other episodes in the back catalogue. If you enjoyed this, leave us a comment. Let us know. Leave us a 5-star review. And please hit the follow button not to miss future episodes, particularly when Rachel returns to talk about product marketing.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I had a blast.
Nice one. Me too. See you soon.
Hey. Did you enjoy this episode? Then be sure to leave us a comment, a review, and hit that follow button. See you next episode.